Okay, welcome to everyone. Good morning. This morning we have a panel where we will discuss the sort of societal implication of AI and in the widest sense. And we have a very nice panel to do so. So in the order in which I see the people here, we have Professor Fausto Giunchiglia from the Computer Science Department of the University of Trento. We have George Gaskell, professor in psychology from the London School of Economics. We have Fiorella Battaglia, professor in philosophy from the LMU University in Munich. And we have Vilma Scarpino, who is the CEO of Doxa, probably actually not the leading company of consumer and market research in Italy. And then there is myself, of course. I'm Giuseppe Veltri. I'm a professor at the sociology department in Trento, and Ivano Bison, who's also a professor in sociology in the sociology department at the University of Trento. We have prepared, I think, a nice discussion. We will start with Professor Giunchiglia, that each of the speakers will speak for around 15 minutes. And after that, I'll do a very short wrap up, and then we will take questions from the audience. So thank you, Fausto. The floor is yours. And I'll just mute myself, and please mute your microphone if you're not speaking, so that there are
okay,
no
thank
noise.
you. Thank you. Do you hear me? I hope you hear me. So
yes, we are.
Very good. So today I'm kind of the AI person in the panel, so I thought I could give some kind of AI introduction to the motivations of some of the AI work, in particular my work in these kind of areas, in particular concentrating on profiles. I mean, profiling is a really crucial point and a crucial topic in AI research, because basically, when you say that you build a profile of a person or of a user, then basically you're saying that the information that you have in the profile provides you knowledge about that one person. So profiling a person, profiling an enterprise or a company is fundamental in order to be able to provide better services, better interactions, and so on and so forth. By the way, usually by a profile, we mean a set of properties by which we assign values, which is basic for any kind of further reasoning. The key observation that the notion of profile, I mean, is a clearly technological profile, but the key observation that we basically use profiles in our everyday life. We profile our friends. Based on their properties, we decide which friend to go out. We provide the companies, we provide our providers, and so on and so forth. So basically, profile is really kind of the scaling up of some notions or some ways of behaving, which are kind of our part of our everyday life into our online experience. However, the key aspect that I think that we need to take into account in the discussion, that when you go to the move to internet, there are at least two major dimensions over which our usual notion of profile gets announced. So the first announcement is that when you think of a profile in internet, I mean, you're now thinking of applying your profiling, I mean, knowing information, knowing properties about people over millions of people. And not only that, but you also have access to people in zero time, in zero space. I mean, like zero time means immediate, and zero space means that space has none of the usual limiting factors that impact our everyday life. So, by the way, this is actually a major, this is exactly why Facebook or like online platform, Amazon made their fortune. Basically, you're able to really scale up this issue of a profile to almost an audience which covers all the world. But that was kind of the basics. But now now there's also some second major factor, which actually was started, I think, pretty much by Amazon. You may want to remember when Amazon was profiling you and would suggest you best book in the early days. Why? Which is a key point, is that once you have data about people, you just apply AI. I mean, apply AI, there are many technologies, mainly machine learning, but not only. And then pretty much, what is the advantage? And then now, not only you have data about lots of people, now you have lots of data about lots of people. And the more data you have, also not only in terms of quantity of data, but also in terms of coverage of the data in different dimensions of the aspect of the person, the more you really can make predictions about people. And let me just tell you, I think that this issue of the ability of making prediction of people is really largely underestimated. I mean, the amount of the information that you can get from students, from people, not only students, when you have lots of data, is almost unbound. In particular, if you have high density data, I mean, like data which are in large quality about the same person. I mean, I remember actually 10 years ago when my PhD, when we did the first experiments, came to me and said, I'm depressed. I mean, it's really depressing how predictable I am. I remember that early days, we were able to predict the third repetition of the same event with 83% after 2 events. And after the third event, we'll be able to predict the next time with 99% precision, which means that, I mean, Google knows about us much more than we think, but when I mean much more, it just means much more. So, see, this amount of information that we get out of profiling, it just is like a nuclear bomb. I don't think people really appreciate, I mean, how huge this and how strong this bomb is. But now the point here is that all good? Is that all bad? Of course, like a nuclear bomb, I mean, when you talk about profiling, I think that technology is not bad or good in itself. The issue is in how you use it. And but it's definitely the fact that this kind of technology really has a set of major consequences. Now, the first one, which I'm going to mention is privacy. Clearly, there is a huge problem of privacy. Europe spent a lot of time into this, produced a GDPR, regulations, but I'm not going to talk about. This is a different topic from the one topic I want to talk about today. But this is a major consequence, and which is a consequence of the fact that at the beginning we just did a lot of technological innovation without really understanding the consequence of what we were doing. And let me say that I don't think people really understand how pervasive, impactful the consequences are. Just because, as I said, that there is much more of ourselves in the data than we really can think of, at least let me put it this way: there is much more in this data than I used to think when I started this kind of work. But the second major consequence of this kind of phenomenon of profiles online is the fact that diversity appears in all its strength. I mean, what do I mean by diversity? I mean the following. I mean something which is always in front of our eyes. I mean, no two people are the same. We are all different. I mean, 2 shops are different. The 2 trees are different. 2 people are different. Now, and that's pretty obvious to think about. Just if you think of the properties, I mean, there is no 2 people concentrating on people who are at the same time the same age, gender and so on and so forth. We kind of share certain property values with some people, but the set of people with which we share properties is different depending on the property. And of course, is that new? Is that news? No news. I mean, this has been part of life forever. But what is the key point that I'm going to concentrate on today is that you see, there is a fundamental difference that I think even now people are clearly underestimating. There are 2 types of diversity. One is the diversity that you expect, and then the other one is the diversity that you don't expect. I mean, think of yourself where you live in your everyday life. You know the people; all those people are different from you, but they don't scare you. They don't create worries from you. Why? Actually, you exploit them. I mean, you have your like neighborhood with a doctor. You ask him or her for help. You know where to go to bed to get the best cappuccino and so on and so forth. So diversity, given that none of us is perfect, given that none of us can do everything, is actually an amazing possibility for all of us to improve our quality of life. But see, but the key feature of with this kind of diversity, that is exactly the diversity that we live with every day. So it's diversity to which our brain got trained for years since we were kids, like even the language diversity. But now with the internet, pretty much, we now are able to interact in zero time with 7 billion people. And some of those people are very different for many reasons. And I'm not just talking the basic difference of gender, religion, whatever you want, the kind of the usual ones that people talk about. These are just even the micro tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are millions of dimensions over which people from different cultures really are very different from people from other cultures. So, and by the way, this phenomenon is just now for the following reason. Think on the Middle Ages. Think on, first of all, in the Middle Ages, not so many people were able to travel. So the people dealing with a diversity were just a small minority. Not only that, but think of an Italian going to Denmark. I mean, so we take him or her like 1 week, 2 weeks together, she will get used to go there. Now, no, now we just have diversity in front of us immediately, and we just get random people to interact with us. So is that good or bad? I mean, of course, it is good and bad, as I said before. And but let me just analyze both a positive and negative sense. The negative effects are in front of us. I mean, like right now, if you talk to AI, everybody in AI talks about fairness. Everybody in AI talks about fairness. Why? Because for instance, we have AI systems which are like racist, AI systems which don't take a gender into enough consideration. But see, the point here is that it's not the problem with the system, it's not the problem with the algorithms. We did some extensive study, and the algorithm just learned what is in the data. I mean, if in the data, gender is not properly taken into account, even the real world, I'm sorry, the data are not properly taken into account, the data reflects this aspect. Not only that, there's fake news. Is that fake news? Of course, there are people who can play with fake news because they're going to use them to their own perspective. But how much of this fake news or much of this intended bias is just diversity, either in the data or in the people, we just reflect the diversity that is in the society, which is in the world. So the bottom line, I'm saying that everything, or at least one of the major consequences, or the major worries, or even of the European Commission now, with the people when talk about the AI, which is bias, fake news, unexpected interactions, not faithful interactions in the web, are just a consequence of diversity, unexpected. How many times? Sometimes we meet a person, we talk to the person sounds strange to us, and after some clarifications, we get to it and we get to know that person, and then we adjust. Doesn't mean that we agree with that person. It means at least we understand a different perspective. Well, none of this is possible in the web, and this is really a major impact. I mean, it's not the case that right now in AI we have tens of conferences on ethics and AI. This is really a major problem. And this, by the way, what everybody talks about, but the point is that somehow, unexpectedly, people talk about the negative effects of diversity. They don't even call it diversity, we call it bias or fake news, but it's the same phenomenon. I would say actually that diversity is the underlying phenomenon. They forgot the positive effects of diversity, which is exactly what allows us every day when we deal with unexpected diversity to be much to exploit the different competencies of people around us, right? And by the way, this is exactly what online platforms, this is what exactly allow us to do. This is exactly what WhatsApp allows us to do. We can get to contact people who are very far from us, who are different from us. We can ask for help and so on and so forth. Let me just say that my personal opinion is that the current platforms are just the beginning of this phenomenon, which is going to grow in time, because more and more, besides, think of COVID now, think of the smart working, think of smart education, more and more you're going to move online, and more you're going to use or move online all the kind of social interactions that we're now dealing in the real world. And by the way, in this kind of interactions, Google will not help. Google will not help simply because Google covers what you usually call in AI the big head. the kind of the most common phenomena. It doesn't cover the long tails of the specific needs of someone someone may have. My usual favorite example is the rare diseases. I mean, like if you have a rare disease, you can search as much as you want in Google, you'll not find a solution for it, even if now there are associations in Europe aiming and doing that. So all this issue of the long tail, all this issue of replicating the kind of very fruitful and very useful interactions of social relations is completely an open point. And by the way, I'm not talking social relations person to person, but even in the interaction between companies providing services like retail, health, whatever, it's very clear that the possibility of that we have now with these very detailed profiles, new methodologies of interactions are huge simply because now there is a possibility to go to the long tail. And this, I think, is one of the major dimensions that I think AI in the next days is gonna do. So why all of this? All of this to say that actually this is exactly the kind of project that we have done. We call it WeNet, the Internet of Us, and is a project that we have been working where exactly we're trying to do two things. Number one, increase the positive effects of social relations online with diversity, and at the same time minimizing the negative effects of bias and unexpected diversity. And I think that would be a good way to start this panel. Why? Because right now we just talked AI, and clearly from an AI perspective, the issues are huge. I mean, we have to deal with multiple languages, with multiple cultures, multiple competencies, multiple contexts of interactions, multiple incentives, trust among people. Trust is a huge problem in AI these days. But in a sense, the technological issues are kind of only the starting point, because you see in the past, we did a lot of technological innovation before the social innovation. But for all of this to work, I think we need a lot of social understanding, psychological understanding of the interaction between people. We need ethics. We really need to see how we can drive technology to get to a better society. For sure, this kind of society is more automated than when we had 10 years ago. Whether it is better or worse, I think is an open point. So to conclude, here we are. We do have a really huge possibility given us to internet, AI, data, profiles. How to go from here to the future is an open question, which requires just much more effort and much more interdisciplinary that we did in the past. And so I think this is a good way to conclude and leave the floor to the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Fausto. Very interesting. Okay, I will move to Fiorella now. I know you have some slides, so feel free to share them and just go ahead, Fiorella. You're muted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot to Fausto. I enjoyed very much your talk, and I think I will basically be echoing what you already said, and yeah. So I have some slides, and can you see them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Working.
Okay. So as Fausto already said, so our society are information societies, and so the point is that we are on a daily basis, we are more and more relying on algorithms for services and for infrastructures. So we are relying on algorithms as individuals, because so algorithms so recommend us, they make suggestions about what we may like, be it to choose a song, a book, a product, or even a friend. And at the same time, institutions or private and public bodies, they are also relying on algorithms. Why are relying on algorithms? To make decisions and to make predictions. And but the point is, so that algorithms actually produce new content, and by producing new content, they make suggestions, they make significant decisions, and they make predictions. And of course, this can be beneficial to our society, but so this kind of activities comes with some ethical risks, and I am not sure about the fact whether we are living in a dataist society, as Noel Harari says, but what I can say, and what has already been highlighted by Fausto, so algorithms are not ethically neutral. And so we can, I will try to characterize this algorithmic activity. So maybe Fausto can correct my analysis. So basically we have three steps. The first one is the input, so data sets, and this steps is already regulated by the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation, which is in force since 2018, and in the meanwhile is already a standard, a global standard. And then we have two further steps. So the computational processing, so the machine learning step, and the output. And for the regulation of these two further steps, we are waiting for the European Artificial Intelligence Act. Since April this year, we already have a proposal, and I will shortly introduce so this proposal. So this is the overview. And first of all, so the question, what causes us to give an increased level of credibility to an algorithm suggestion, decision, or prediction? And I guess that the sociologists and the psychologists among us, so they will be able to explain better so the reasons for this kind of difference. And so I have some suggestions. So first of all, so we expect advantages by using algorithms, and we think that algorithms are more efficient than humans. They can exhibit objectivity and neutrality, which are so the mark of the human cognitive processes. But given this picture, nevertheless, I think that we need to be more cautious because, as I said, that algorithms are not ethically neutral, and there is a bias in collective interpretive resources when it comes to make sense of our experience with automated systems. So this is, as I already said, you know Harari, and he is exposing so the fact that there are some algorithms that may be able to know us better than you know ourselves. And the same worry is expressed by Gloria Origi and Serena Ciranna. And they say that it's important not to give up our epistemic autonomy, our epistemic first person authority over the possible uses of algorithms. So we need to compensate to find some kind of equilibrium in using algorithms. And so there are particular sensitive fields for operating with algorithms, and which are so policy domains. And basically they are so when we take administrative decision or judicial decision or political legislative decision. So the effect on policy domains are particularly worrying, or at least so this will be my point. So then, so Fausto already defined what profiling is, and I think that concerning our first-person authority, our epistemic authority about ourselves, so algorithms predicting our behavior are especially problematic. So we should be more ethically cautious with this kind of algorithms predicting our actions. And we already have the Article 22 from GDPR, and this article is dealing with prediction, and there is this provision that the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision based solely on automatic processing, including profiling. So this means a human being has to be in the loop. And why this? Because there are a lot of consequences. And we have some example of these consequences. So there are cancellation of a contract, granting or denying entitlement to a welfare benefit, denial of admission to a country, or denial of citizenship, or financial circumstances may be affected from these decisions, or access to healthcare services, denial of employment opportunities, or interference with the person's access to education. So as I said, so the GDPR has already this tool in order to deal with profiling. From the more ethical perspective, we have some models. One is what has been already mentioned by Fausto. It's the fairness, accountability, and transparency model. And then we have this other model which has been developed by the Oxford Research Group with the Digital Ethics Lab, which published a comprehensive study, and they sought to map this ethical concern. Then another model is this guidelines from the high-level expert group on the artificial intelligence, which have been released in 2019. The proposal, so the Europe and the regulation artificial intelligence. So the idea is, so this is how the proposal has been received in by the general public. So Europe wants to become the world super regulator in artificial intelligence. So they want to have the same impact on regulation they already had with the GDPR. And so this is the so-called the Bruxelles Effect. And so this is the proposal, and I will say something in order to characterize the proposal. First of all, so what kind of approach exhibit the proposal? This proposal is based on public consultation approach. So this means that first of all, so the creation of the 52-member high-level group, and then so the white paper on which everybody could comment online. And this possibility to comment on the different stages of the proposal will be open in the next future as well. The proposal is based on two different approaches. So the first one is the focus on safety. So and this approach considers artificial intelligence as a product. And then there is another approach which is not which is a standalone approach, and this is based on fundamental rights. And therefore, we already can see a problem referring to these two approaches which are not communicating each other. And so, as I said, so the approach on risks. So the first one, so the regulation focus on the riskiest one's application of artificial intelligence. So therefore, social scores is banned in Europe. So we cannot have something like in China. So the main concerns of this proposal are surveillance and manipulation. And so therefore, the focus is very much on these two kinds of activities. And there is something which is, from the legal perspective, interesting, and it is the creation of sandboxes. So there are spaces in which firms can make some kind of experimentation along with the legal experts, so without fearing to have some penalties. Okay, so then what are the response? There is some disagreement from both sides. So human rights advocates criticize because the proposal is not clear enough, and business groups complain because they see the possibility to limit the development of innovation in the artificial intelligence areas. And what are the predictions, the forecast about the artificial intelligence proposal? So for the GDPR, it took 4 years in order to progress from the proposal to the act. But maybe in this case, Europe will be faster than with the GDPR, because the regulation of artificial intelligence is in the political program of this presidency. And yeah, so there are. So this is my last. It will be my last point. So there are different models which can play a role in the regulation of artificial intelligence. So on the one side we have the China model, and then on the other side we have the possibility to regulate this field based on the American approach, and then thirdly we have the possibility to regulate artificial intelligence drawing on the European values. So these three models are somehow competing, and it will be very interesting to see which of these model will become the global standard. And this is all for me.
Thank you, Fiorella. You can stop sharing. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And I will now pass the virtual microphone to George. And George, the floor is yours. You're muted. Just there we go.
Okay, can you hear me? Good show. Well, in the 80th year of Bob Dylan's life on Earth, I think we can capture one of his famous songs, "The Times They Are A-Changing" for AI. Or as another commentator put it, GDPR, the functional equivalent of GDPR is coming along for AI. Now, if we look at what's happening in Brussels, it's very interesting to read from the President of the European Union, who talks about the EU digital transformation. And that has two key elements. One, empowerment of European citizens, and secondly, protection of European citizens. And as Fausto told us, these profiling activities are very extensive and are likely to become more extensive. As somebody said, Google knows more about the average individual in the world than Stasi knew about members of the East German so-called Democratic Republic. Are we worried about this? Well, clearly they are in Brussels, and as Fiorella explained, they've had the high-level groups and so forth. Now, the draft regulations are going to, as they say, ban systems that cause or are likely to cause physical or psychological harm through subliminal techniques. Now, it's interesting, I think it was in the 50s, there was a real worry about subliminal advertising in cinemas. And when I was an undergraduate, there's a famous psychologist at University College London, Norman Dixon, who did a great deal of work on subliminal perception. And a lot of people thought at the time that this was just kind of snake oil cognitive theorizing. But it turns out subliminal perception is a real phenomenon. So subliminal techniques must be banned, and also techniques which exploit vulnerabilities. And they capture three vulnerabilities: age, physical or mental disabilities. But interestingly, what they say is, although the high-risk algorithms and AI applications will be banned, they very much encourage people who are developing systems to foster the voluntary application of standards, so self-regulation. And as I read this, it brought to my mind a very interesting PhD, which I examined quite recently from a student at the Open University of Catalonia. And this PhD really is about the blurring of the boundary between entertainment and product advertising amongst for children. It's what they call advergames. So there's a product, there's a game, the games are fun, the product is embedded in the game, and children learn to enjoy that brand. Now, the worry here is, first of all, that children are, by definition, vulnerable consumers. They haven't the cognitive capacity, the younger ones, to appreciate what it is about advertising, etc., etc. But it's also more worrying than that, because on the whole, these advergames are promoting foodstuffs which are unhealthy. They're promoting foodstuffs which children love. They're high in fat, they're high in sugar, and they're high in salt. And these are fundamentally unhealthy and are contributing, some argue, to an epidemic of childhood obesity. Now, we know that obesity is one of the comorbidities that if people are obese, they got COVID, they tended to suffer a good deal more than people who had normal weight. So obesity is not just a little bit chubby, it's a danger. So in this PhD, there's a very interesting content analysis of these games. And they're promoted by Facebook, Google Play, iTunes, Disney. They're all involved in it. A very detailed content analysis of what the games were doing, what brands were associated with the games, whether there were any protective measures. So young children are supposed to, well, there's supposed to be parental guidance. Is that built in? Are there indications that it is an advertisement, that they are promoting, the games are promoting a particular product and so forth? Now, as I recall, and I read my report on this PhD last evening just to remind me, but there was one I thought very telling observation, which I couldn't find in detail, and that was the companies that trumpeted their commitment and enthusiasm to self-regulation were least likely to feature protective interventions in these games. So it calls into question self-regulation, calls for moral integrity, which is in short supply in the commercial sector in Western Europe, are unlikely to be terribly effective. So if I were in Brussels, I would be thinking that a more dirigiste approach to consumer protection, and particularly for children, is necessary. So Giuseppe and I are in a behavioral research program, consortium. We're doing work currently for the Commission on dark practices. These are very commonplace. And what is a dark practice? A dark practice on the web is through a variety of techniques, persuading people to do things which otherwise they probably would not do, i.e. to make decisions which favor the commercial enterprise supporting them, not necessarily as a member of the public. So I just want to flag up that self-regulation is a lovely idea, but it needs, it may fall short of the expectations of many citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. And last but not least, we have Vilma. Vilma, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And thank you, all the speakers. I found everything you said, George, Fausto, and Fiorella, very, very interesting, because all the things that you talk about very important for our sector, because I'm working in marketing research, and the business community in marketing research is very interested in the effect of the GDPR, and I talk to you in a while about this point, and all the effect that's the discussion at the, that is now in the EU about AI, but on all the technology. Our sector has been very, very affected by the technology, as many others, but since we work with people, with citizens, with consumers, we have to be very careful to our activity from 2 points of view. The first one is the business point of view. So I think that in marketing research, we have to talk with the brand, and we must be very careful on what kind of research we have to conduct, and we must be very careful towards the aim of the research that we are going to do. George talked about the obesity, and we know that brands wanted to sell to the people or convince people through many different approaches, and using very different techniques to buy something that is not healthy. At the same time, there are a lot of debates and a lot of work that we are doing with other brands that they do not want to push something that is not unhealthy, and they are working to find a way to reduce the part of the unhealthiness that you have in your product. So there are a lot of business lines that are working now like this. On the other hand, consumers participate or not to participate to some kind of work that we want to do, because they want to know how we will use their own data. Because one of the key points for people is to know how their data will be managed and with which aim. And it is quite strange, because we know that when they go to Google to search something, or when they buy through Amazon something, or when they order online food, or they use web, they always give yes when the computer asks them if they wanted to be, if they wanted to accept the rule of using the data. But in the reality, they said yes, because they want to have access to the service or to the products. But in the meantime, they don't know, at the same time, they don't know if they think a little bit over this behavior, how this data will be used. They complain sometimes, and they do not realize how to, in the end, which is the kind of use and who are using their own data. So when we work with people and we ask them to participate to a panel, for example, we have to ask them if they wanted that we measure their behaviors in a passive or active way. They ask us many questions, and we are first to produce a lot of bureaucracy from a legal point of view and from a practical point of view. So we have very strict procedures that came from the GDPR application that limited us in many circumstances, but at the same time, people in this case are more sensitive in saying yes or not, I wanted to participate. So this is a first discrimination difference that we found when we work or while working. So when we ask to people, do we want to participate to this panel, and we survey some of your behaviors during the year, for example, they can accept or not, and they can say at a certain point, anytime, to ask us to cancel the data. It is not clear how they can check, because the law said that they can check, but in any case they don't check because they are not able. So they trust on us, on our behavior. So it is another point. So I think that in the end we are restricting our business and our way of working in the technology field, because we wanted to respect what people want and want to give to us about their own data. But it is not the same thing that happened to the big tech, the OTT, and all the other technology companies that are following. So for us could be a problem, not for all the business players that citizens are in contact with. So this is a point. Another point is, we are starting working in the web content many years ago. So now we use AI, we use algorithms, but we use also human experience, just to not to take for granted all the activity and the results of the application of the algorithm, and not to apply something, and not to say and to give to the client something that is not perfectly correct. So in this case, we do not have any restrictions on our side, and we can help in understanding what is going on in the web. When we use different sorts of data coming from clients, for example, when they give us database that we have to use together with our database that we collect during service. Obviously, we have to be strict to the law and to the procedures in using names of people that the company is giving to us. And the major problem is that sometimes companies are not very precise in creating such a database. So the first thing that we do when we have to receive one database is to check that the database is compliant with the law. Otherwise, we do not accept, and we do not accept the request of adjusting the data sets that we receive. When we work with this kind of data, we have to respect a lot of rules in the data breach, for example, as you know. And this is another part that first has to reinforce all our IT structure. And this is not for granted, it is very expensive in terms of money and resources. And this is something that the company has to do at its own. So the brands, the companies are not agree in contributing to this. So this is an investment that we have to do every day. So sometimes, and sometimes we have difficulties in integrate the database because we need to use obviously technology, data scientists in doing this, and it is not so easy as it could appear when we talk about the passive activity. When you use meter or something like Fausto starting talking in his speech, it is quite difficult. Because we have to have people with us who want to do this, because it is because we face the same difficulty that we have when we recruit people for being a panel. So how do they have to do or to accept such a survey? Why do they have to accept to participate in such an experiment, for example? How do they have to accept to have their own behavior tracks every day, every night, every moment in their own life? So we have to explain the aim very well, just to give to them the reason why to participate. They generally don't do this for literature or for research. They have to understand that there is an advantage for the community or for their own themselves. So this and it is a matter of trust in what we have to do. So the company that started doing such a work have to be a very high rate of trust in the people. Otherwise, could be difficult to participate for us as a company, as a marketing research business community in such a and activity. Diversity is another topic. It's difficult to follow what you said before, because when we ask the people to participate, we ask to all people, depending on the characteristics that you wanted to survey, so the sample that you want to have. So, which is the level of adjustment that we have to do to the sample, and who is able to understand which is the level of diversity that we are excluding or not. So I think there are very big topic that we have to face, and we have to try to face and to answer every day in our life. From a survey that we run through many countries, 35 countries at the beginning of the year, we know that, for example, people, just half of the people wanted that their data are used by companies and by tech players. So they are not sure that they want to give the data, even if they, in the end, they give the data to them. But the main doubt is why. So I think that companies that use the data have to explain to the people why they are collecting data and how they are going to use their data. So this is a short talk, quite wide, just to give to you the feeling of which are the effects of the technology on the marketing research activity. So we can say the effect of AI, the effect of the content analysis through algorithms. So we have many effects from all the application of the technology on our business. So I don't want to go on and bother you with many troubles and problems that we have to face, but just to give to you the flower of what we do working in marketing research.
Okay, thank you, Vilma. Okay, I'll say a few words myself. I thought I would give a summary, but actually I think you know that there are some sort of common threads running across all the interventions. What I think when I think about the sort of impact of AI from a social scientist perspective, of course, there's been a lot of debate about the issue of algorithmic discrimination, the issue of fairness, and I think Fausto mentioned very well that at the end of the day, if the inputs of AI reflect a discrimination that already exists in society, of course, there was an issue of raising awareness about this point, that perhaps, you know, the AI community at the beginning might not have been aware, so to speak, but I think they are pretty much aware of it now. But I think a lot of fears are when AI is thought as a substitute of human decision making. Okay. And I think, you know, I can see why there are these fears, but I think in that respect, we also ignore the fact that also human decision making was biased, you know, in many ways, and in fact exclude the possibility that AI could be used to correct these mistakes. I mean, that there are attempts to, you know, to do in a so to speak, you know, AI to spot discrimination rather than to create one. But I think the other area, which I think is much more murky, although I see the potential there as well, is when AI is thought to complement human decision-making, okay? And when it is about complementing human decision-making, it creates opportunities, but also it creates new vulnerabilities, because it creates also the situation where people could be manipulated, could be in a way influenced in a way that they are not aware of. I mean, the issues that George was mentioning refers to the fact that, there is a great deal of choice architecture, in digital platforms that is designed by purpose to, push people to do certain things rather than others. And of course, that's functional to the platform. But my feeling is that in the arms race of applying AI, the side of the common citizens is very much without weapons at this stage. So what I mean here is that you have AI applied in the platform. You don't have AI for the citizens to fight back, so to speak. And so we don't have that kind of possibility. And I think, there is no way around this problem, because as complexity increases in the services we use, in the digital traces we leave, it's not that we can roll back the clock of time and go back to saying, no, I don't want to be profiled anymore. I don't want to be digitally online, because once you are, you are. There is no going back. But the problem is that then the question is, okay, as new vulnerabilities emerge, what can we do about it? And the problem with regulation, regulation, we need regulation. I mean, as a European, I don't like the Chinese approach to AI, which has some specific, political reasons the way it is, but also the American ones, which, although in America there are different positions, I assume. However, what I can say about the EU approach about regulation, it is often very optimistic about the capacity of citizens to keep under control, so to speak, everything they need to do. Take the case of GDPR. Very good idea in principle from the point of view of citizens. Ask consensus every time my data, move from one set of ends to another, because I need to know where my data are and what they're used for. But that generates a huge amount of information that requires continuously consensus. And you remember what happened when the GDPR came into place. Dozens of consents form bombarded our emails, and people just clicked yes, yes, and yes without thinking twice. Or I guess very few went there and read the consensus and what they had to do all the time, because the GDPR was fought, with this idealistic idea of citizens with unlimited resources of time and cognitive resources, and so consensus was the solution. And I think the problem is that in AI, you want to avoid that. You want to avoid a situation where, there is the problem where how feasible is the regulation in covering this vulnerability. I cannot offer any solution at this stage, of course, but I think the blending of AI, and of course, when we talk about AI, it means different technologies, different points. So also we should also distinguish between those, because they're not exactly the same. They don't have the same consequences. They are not just one package, so to speak, because today we mentioned mainly machine learning algorithms, but there are other applications of AI that could also be important. But I think there is a very, very wide set of consequences in society that we are still trying to understand yet. And I think the interplay between these technologies and how we behave is now so strong that there is little we can do to go back in. But the point is how we can now make it work in this context. But I'll stop here, because I think it would be nice to hear from the other people. I don't know if Ivano, you want to say something, but otherwise we can open the mic.
I think better if there are some questions from the floor, from the participant.
Okay, so whoever
the time is not a lot, then I prefer to leave.
Okay, so for please either write something in the chat or just simply raise your virtual hand and speak. I can keep track of who wants to intervene. And of course, if nobody wants to intervene, also the other speakers can intervene back. So let's see.
I have a question.
Let's wait, Fiorella, a second to see if someone from the audience has a question. Otherwise, you go. Because it's always the problem of breaking the ice, so to speak. Federico, you disappeared. You don't have any question.
Yeah, actually, I have many questions. I'm a little bit in trouble with how to choose one. I would like to ask whether it could be useful to distinguish between AI and algorithms. I mean, it seems to me that AI is always implying an algorithmic structure, but not all the algorithms are intelligent or able to develop some so-called intelligent behavior. So maybe this could be useful. I wonder whether this distinction could be useful in the debate or not, or it is just we don't know to distinguish between algorithms and AI just because common people like me treat both as the same thing. This is one question, and the other one is that there is it seems to me that the big problem, or one among the main problem is about trust on what on public institution, also maybe in private companies or intermediate bodies in the society, because we, as you said before, we have not, as common citizens, we have not time enough and attention enough to go deep every time our attention would be requested in order to treat or to cope with the problem of privacy or the use of our data and so on. So we need trust, and maybe from a sociological point of view, the main question is about trust, how we can reconstruct or build or recover trust when trust is damaged in some way. And this is also very relevant, it seems to me, also in the case of the problem of using or being used by AI.
Okay, thank you, Federico. Fausto, do you want to say something about distinction between algorithms and AI?
Yes. I think that AI is overestimated, largely overestimated. I think AI is much more stupid than people think. I think that AI is just stupid. The problem is that there is no, I read a lot of nonsense. Even the European regulations to me are nonsense. Machine learning is just stupid. And there is one minor detail, which is you spend like, there was this famous paper from Boston where they show that to train a neural network, because this is what people are talking about, you need enough energy, the same energy as for 3 cars in their life. So this is why all the people, these are the effects. So all the machine learning that people do now, they're just reuse machine learning algorithm trained by Google and trained by Facebook. They're the only ones who have the machines and the money to do this. But you see, the one defect that these machines have, these algorithms have, is like they are static. I mean, they are trained once for all, and they're never retrained. So since the world evolves, is evolving very fast, they're going to be bound to be stupid. They always, so the risk of AI now, and by the way, I said this in a note to a PO because I was asked informed by a PO in Brussels to review the AI notes. This is what I said to him in writing, but it was informal. I think is really the point of AI is not AI, is ourselves. Is the fact that people AI. I mean, I remember when I was in the old days in Stanford, AI, artificial intelligence, is not intelligence, that's algorithms. And of course, now there is an inductive favor of machine learning. But the point of AI is that if we overrate AI, if we don't keep AI in control. And by the way, from this point of view, the European legislation where you say you want the human in the loop, yes, that's correct. Also because, but by the way, I don't think this kind of AI is going to go very far. I mean, we already lived in AI, this kind of the AI winter in the end of the 80s and so on. So going back to your question, I mean, there is a sense in which you're right. You want to talk about machine learning and the over assumption that people do about machine learning, over expectations. But for instance, I mean, like internet had huge. I mean, AI, since I was young, in the 80s, I was at Stanford, AI was always being the big thing to come, but it never came. In the meanwhile, databases came, internet came, web came. And it was very interesting when I was at Stanford. I mean, when I was young, we say everything until it's very vague, it becomes AI. When it becomes concrete, it becomes databases, knowledge bases, internet networking. So I think this will happen. Something huge will come out of this. But will not be AI. Maybe we move to the next dream, whatever. And I do believe that the fundamental issues in the globalized world, this is why I'm talking about so by diversity, will have to do with something will be algorithmic at that time, which is we'll have to be more predictable. You see, one of the big problems that people, we know the research in AI now is explainability. Nobody knows how they work. I mean, nobody knows why they work. And they don't know, and it was when I was in the 80s, we built expert systems. There was technology, this company, we built expert systems. We know what was a big problem with expert systems? They never knew when they failed. So they failed, they are right, they don't know. The same as deep learning. Do you know, they say they don't, deep learning, they don't know why they failed, but also the people who wrote them don't know why they failed. At least in the old days, since the code was we could understand why the expert system was failing. Now, we could fix it, but it didn't work because there is this issue of time. See, the time evolves. We are very flexible as humans. I mean, so do we have I don't think for the moment the machines. So I think it's a useful distinction to distinguish the hype or some hype from something will happen, but AI will become algorithms. But in which way it will become algorithms? In which way machine learning will get into the algorithm? Because machine learning will get into the algorithm. We'll get some hours, and we'll get in a controlled way, right? So this is a fundamental. And by the way, from my point of view, and then I stop the discussion here, is that a second main weakness of the AI regulations, so that the AI regulation, there's a fundamental difference between GDPR and the AI regulations. When GDPR came around, the phenomenon was very well known. I mean, there have already been 10 years of Google and Facebook. We understood. I mean, the problem is, in AI now we are writing regulation for something which is yet to come, and to me will never come. And what I think is a major bug with the AI regulations, they are too prescriptive instead of suggesting way of using data. I mean, we're prescribing something that we don't know what's going to be. We do not know. For sure, we don't know where AI is going to appear in 5 years from now. I'm sure it will come. I'm sure the next wave will come. And I think it will rotate around all these issues of privacy. I'm very, very happy that what Vilma said, that people are worried about privacy. When 5 years ago I started saying, we have to worry about privacy, people told me, no. We don't care, nobody cares. People care more and more. I think that trust is going to be another major issue. Nobody knows how to solve trust. Trust to whom? And by the way, you trust someone, but then that one you trust him, does he know what he's talking about? For instance, right now in the new code in the European project, there's a big issue on awareness. Awareness, I think, is much more harder to do. So I think it's very, very early days, and what can I say? The only point I'm saying that I'm very happy to be in a panel like this. I think we should do more of this. I think that AI in the past has been too technology driven. So we are, and technology has been good, but right now what is at stake is too big. I mean, building planes, took planes or cars a few 100 years to have an impact on the world, like getting to the climate change. But now with AI having an impact on the world, I think it can be much faster. just because I don't mean deep learning. I mean the next generation of AI system, the next online platforms. So I think one last point, and I'm shut up. All the current online platforms are. Let me make my prediction on what's going to be the next. It's a wild prediction, so you may take it. And if you look at all the basic AI platform now, they just solve basic needs. Like Amazon serves that looks for the basic need to give you food, how to survive. Google gives you the basic need of information missing. Facebook and WhatsApp give you the basic need of social relations. They are very fundamental. But they kind of cover the big tail. The big head, what everybody needs. I think the future is going to be much more into these personalized services, really going down to people and find 80 ways of doing this. This way is where AI can work. This is where machine learning can help. Why? Because you can't pre-compile in an algorithm to all the different 9 billion people. But if you pre-compile in there with a way to learn and evolve with the 9 billion people, then that's going to be the next big hit. That would be my guess.
Thank you, Fausto. George, you want to say something? Yes.
Yeah, well, Fausto mentioned climate change, and I was just thinking about that because, if we expect it, if we think it's up to citizens to protect privacy, that is asking quite a lot. But if we look at climate change now, who is putting pressure on the oil companies and on the carbon producing companies? It's shareholders, it's the pension funds, and it's investment funds who are saying, if you don't get your act together on climate change, we will withdraw our funds from your company. Now, the structure of Google, Amazon, and particularly Facebook, which seems to be run by a single autocrat, advised by one of our ex-Liberal Party members, what's his name? It doesn't matter. So the structure of these companies may somewhat preclude shareholder intervention, but I have a suspicion that that is more likely to have an effect on the company policy than trying to persuade millions of people not to click on, use my data, use all the cookies, etc., etc.
And by the way, some companies now are trying to use that commercially, like Apple. Apple is trying to differentiate themselves from the others, saying, I mean, how much that is true, it remains to be determined. But as they are privacy aware, and they care about your privacy, in contrast with Facebook and Google. Of course, it could be just simply marketing, and that could be simply the case. But it started to happen in a way.
Can I just say something building on George? There's one sentence. I think that Google is going to be very hard, if not impossible, to overtake, like Apple. They really have hard technology and the service is very high value. Google may have to change the business model, but will stay. I think Facebook and WhatsApp will be easily beaten by the next generation. Easily. I think this Facebook and WhatsApp can be, I think is where the next generation, I think, is going to come, because they will not change mind. They don't want to change mind. They will not change mind. Just a new startup building new type of social relations will just provide better services. Telecom is getting there. Telecom is not flying because of bad reputation for many good reasons, or bad reasons, I don't know, because of trust, whatever. But I mean, the kind of service, why the kind of service that Google is providing and Apple is providing is very, very hard to replicate. I would say almost impossible. I mean, you just need, whatever, Samsung. I think this issue of Facebook, whatever, personal data, I think is going to be hitting Facebook. And not because they change mind, they're going to be thrown out of market. I think, no, not that. They're going to be put into a niche market. But for sure, none of us are going to exchange medical data in Facebook. Do we need that? Yes, of course we do. We don't know yet, but I mean, there are lots of personal data that we don't want to change in Facebook that later on we want to change.
Attila, you had a question please ask. I mean, we'll try to answer even though the time is running out, but could say something.
Yeah, hello everybody. Sorry. No, I mean, it's a huge question, so I don't think we really have time to approach it now. But I just wanted to say that it seems to me that every time we talk about artificial intelligence, we forget work. The word work, there is a lot of work behind artificial intelligence and connected to artificial intelligence. This may be because, I mean, this comment, it may be caused by the fact that I just finished to read a very interesting book by Antonio Casilli, originally titled Un attendant le robot, enquête sur le travailleur du clic, and now translated in Italian as Schiavi del click. So basically, he is very, very effective in showing what Google calls an artificial intelligence, meaning that it seems that at Google, they talk about artificial intelligence as something artificial, precisely because, in fact, this thing that we call artificial intelligence is, in most of the cases, highly supported by human labor, by human work. There are millions of Indians, Pakistans, people in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Middle East, Asia, constantly working in order to clean data, in order to order data, in order to distinguish a bike from a motorbike, or clicking on sounds in order to say whether that is an alarm or something like that. So, I mean, there is this very intensive and never-ending work, apparently, behind artificial intelligence, which probably, sociologically speaking, could be interesting to take into account, precisely to show how every time we have a technology working, a technology functioning, it seems that there are a lot of humans doing their job. There are a lot of humans connecting their activity and coordinating themselves, either in a more voluntaristic or, let's say, mandatory way. But again, this was something I should have probably raised before when
but yeah,
Giuseppe asked for a contribution for the public.
Okay, thanks, Dr. But no, but it's a very interesting point to add to the discussion. I think let me see. We had until 11 or 11 until 11. Okay, so I think we just can close it here, and I think it was interesting to listen to different point of entry, so to speak, at a discussion on AI. Obviously, these are discussions that I guess we will have to do again in the future and repeat again. But I think it has been useful to bring different perspectives. So I thank you all for your interventions. Fausto, Fiorella, George, and Vilma, special thanks to you. You dedicated this Saturday morning to this. So, and I don't know what else to say. Well, thanks for the people joining us, and I hope the rest of the conference will continue well. I think, do you finish this morning, or also do you have something this afternoon?
Yeah, no, this morning, thanks, Giuseppe, thanks to all of you for organizing this roundtable. Well, we have in a few minutes the closing plenary.
Okay.
Please consider to participate. The Zoom link is in the chat. The keynote speaker is Dimitris Papadopoulos.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So please join the plenary if you want. And I'm recording this well, I've recorded, so I don't know. We'll find a way to share it, I suppose. Yes. Okay.
So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.